There's a lot of weird things that happened on January 6th. Likely federal agents, instigators in the crowd, protesters, the way said protesters have been prosecuted since the event, the way that the media has even treated it. But perhaps the weirdest of all is the plot line that has mostly disappeared from view and could actually shed light on some of the deeper questions of the day. What happened to the so-called pipe bomb investigation? The FBI, as part of their investigation, claimed that on January 5th, 2021, more than 3 years ago now, an unidentified hooded man planted pipe bombs at both the RNC and DNC headquarters on Capitol Hill, intending to cause damage as part of the protest. The pipe bomb was often discussed in the immediate aftermath of the attack, as it was a key piece of media evidence of the violent intent of many protesters going into the day, rather than a spontaneous explosion of rage. Mysteriously, though, years later, as local DC media notes, that pipe bomber has never been caught, despite many protesters being identified by tapping phone records using facial recognition software and every other spyware known to man. It simply disappeared as a talking point, and we're supposed to just forget about it somehow. But some interesting new evidence and analysis has actually come to light that questions a lot of this. Footage of the Capitol Hill area on the day of the alleged bomb was discovered, shows that approximately at 1:05 p.m. in broad daylight, a man in a backpack approaches nearby police and Secret Service agents to tell them that he thinks that there is a bomb that is currently nearby a bench in the DNC. That man, it was later revealed, is a plainclothes Capitol Police officer. The officers in the video, which was released in the Congressman Thomas Massie, do not immediately react when they're told this alarming information. Now keep this in mind, Vice President Kamala Harris is actually inside of the building at this time. They are supposed to be on high alert. And yet, as Darren Beattie at Revolver News notes, quote, "Note how casual and unperturbed both the Metro officers and Secret Service officers are. Ask yourself whether this is how you would imagine the Secret Service would normally respond to the discovery of a bomb right outside of the building housing their protectee." Now, the bomb first appears on camera approximately 5 minutes after the police were tipped off. After that, police officers still allow actually a passing group of pedestrians, including kids, to walk by. A police officer then walks up to the bomb, he takes a photo of it, then before alerting others, he holds up his thumbs up. The video actually cuts off right around there. But the facts we can take away are this. The cops were tipped off to the presence of the bomb by an undercover cop in a hoodie that did not appear at all alarmed by it, even though the vice president was inside the building. 3 years later, nobody knows who this man was, and they also don't know who planted the bomb. The rest of the facts are pretty crazy. As Darren Beattie has written, the official narrative from the FBI is that the pipe bomb was actually placed on the bench outside of the DNC at 7:52 p.m. That was the night before by a man in a hoodie. It was not discovered until a full 17 hours later when the tip-off came. Add in this detail. The pipe bomb was one of two. It's a mere 15 minutes earlier at 12:40 p.m. A random pedestrian allegedly nearby found the first at a Capitol Hill club in Washington, D.C., which is nearby to this location, meaning that the two bombs, which were allegedly placed there 17 hours earlier, according to the authorities, were somehow discovered within mere minutes of each other. Even stranger, according to the report, is that the two pipe bombs were equipped with 1-hour mechanical timers. So while they included live explosive material, if they were planted 17 hours earlier, they were never actually seriously armed to explode because they literally couldn't. All of this, let's just say it's odd. It doesn't prove anything, but it gives us a few possible scenarios. Number one is that this is total and complete incompetence on the part of law enforcement. It is possible, unlikely though, in my opinion. Catching the so-called pipe bomber would have been a huge headline for the FBI, Joe Biden, and the media. They were able to catch MAGA grandmas and people wearing masks who walk through the Capitol, but they can't find someone who allegedly tried to bomb it? According to the FBI, the January 6th investigation is the largest in the history of the Bureau. This is one where lack of resources and attention after the fact is just not a viable explanation. The other that Revolver puts forward is that this was somehow known to law enforcement, that perhaps the reason the police did not immediately act is because they knew it was BS, or that perhaps the Capitol Police officer who tipped off the cops is the one who, in the hood, planted it himself. One easy way is to just talk to that man. 3 years later, we don't even know the idea or the name of that Capitol Police officer. It has never even been released, despite many questions from members of Congress. So that's where we just leave a few things. I mean, I wrote this monologue exactly 3 years after Joe Biden took the oath of office, when this was one of the biggest stories in the world. And yet, it's mostly disappeared. And to be clear, that doesn't mean nothing bad happened on January 6th, and the people involved are not responsible for their actions. But it does mean that within the cloud of all of this, as with many tumultuous events, there are major parts of the story that do not pass the smell test, and ones that need to be investigated to this day. To date, nobody but Revolver, a few other independent journalists, have even touched this story. The reasons are obvious. If you dig deep, it's pretty clear where some of these things are going to land. Crystal, I mean, one of the things I even discovered...
Hey guys, obviously I had a lot of thoughts on what Saagar had to say there, so if you want to see my thoughts on this monologue and every other Saagar monologue, make sure you subscribe at breakingpoints.com.